So friends, over the past many years, whenever we've discussed Hyundais, I've been very honest with you about where they fall on the driving dynamics spectrum. And it's usually not up here, it's down here. That's changed a little bit as we discussed in the tech review, but that's more about like Elantra Sport kind of stuff, not Sonatas. However, when I first dug into all the documentation on this thing, prepping for this episode, the first thing, here's the bonus eyes, better slow down. The first thing that the Hyundai folks went on and on about is not the design, all the technology. They went on and on about the change in the steering. They said something about 12% stiffer torsion bar, which has better on-center feel. So I'm like, okay, we'll see about that. And I'm telling you, these people that didn't pay me to say this, I am blown away at the huge difference in the steering. Granted, you should not be trying this at home in a Hyundai Sonata, but holy crap, the steering actually works really well. Like to the point of, I think we have to move up a couple of notches even at the top of the episode on the driving dynamic spectrum. It's that big of a difference. So over the past couple episodes, you and I have spent a lot of time focusing on the D segment, this. Sadly, that segment is shrinking because more people are focusing on buying crossovers. This, I don't understand, but then again, I'm a Lotus guy and totally impractical. But there is a practical side of me, and I like to focus on numbers. And the reason why this was always the biggest, most volume segment for most car manufacturers has been the size it offers for younger families, specifically the wheelbase. So in this case, it's 110.3 inches. How does that compare to its biggest competitors, the Nissan Altima, the Toyota Camry, and the Ford Fusion? Well, the Altima is the shortest at 109.3. The Camry, the new one we just drove like 3 weeks ago, that's 110 inches, so almost this. And then the biggest, believe it or not, is the Ford at 112.2. Now, before we unpack pulling power, we need to discuss the economics of the Sonata for Hyundai. I know that sounds a bit strange, but follow me for a minute here. So, since the Sonata has been introduced, Hyundai has sold 2.8 million of them. It accounts for 31% of Hyundai Motor America's annual sales. This is a big deal. What's even more of a big deal is that Hyundai has grown its market share of the Sonata from a measly 2 to 4%, something like 17 years ago, to now 14% of the mid-size car market. Now you can understand why they start offering different derivations, like the base model we talked about, or this turbo that is 245 horsepower. So with that, let's come around this nice turn, put our foot into it. It goes. I would argue that there's more oomph, more pulling power than the driving dynamics can cash checks for. Get what I'm saying? Like, let's try this again. Put our foot into it from about 30. Strong pulling power, which is what you want in a vehicle like this for passing. This is not a stoplight Grand Prix kind of thing, although I do have to say, a bit of an aside, me and Jim went and shot the stand-ups for both this and the Elantra Sport GT episode at the same time. So we're heading back to base camp with the two cars. And we had a bit of a drag race, don't tell the Hyundai folks this. This thing, it was like I was standing still in the Elantra, but horsepower-wise, not that big of a difference, and this has a 500-pound weight disadvantage, yet still, I couldn't keep up. So Kumo is at home with a frost black V12 600 horsepower BMW M760. So you could imagine I really could not entice him to come down to San Diego to help me with his shoot. So to make up for his absence, extra Pelicans. So let's see if this actually can work here. With there's a key somewhere around here. Here we go. Let's release this. And we got Pelican number 1. That's pretty good. Let's try the bigger Pelican, really give it a test here. Oh, that one didn't want to stay, so let's put that here, put that here, and then, oh man, this is Jim's Pelican. I don't know how a proud Arizona State Sun Devil like myself, even with Arizona State colors, ended up with this Pelican. You know what, this is not even gonna go into the trunk. We're leaving it there. Then we take this Pelican here. Yeah, it works. I hope Kumo's happy. Now there's one more thing from the business side of the Sonata that impacts the driving dynamics, and that is the fact that this is the 7th generation Sonata, which brings us back to the whole reason for being of the Sonata for Hyundai, and that is it's a D-segment car. It's designed to haul the rugrats, not a lot of them, maybe not particularly big ones with a lot of stuff, or maybe not toddlers with a lot of crap that they somehow bring to the fray of your life. But it's not meant for roads like this. However, we're still going to do that. So let's put our foot into it. Now, one thing I neglected to share with you before was there are different driving modes. I'm in sport mode right now, and all that impacts is the weight of the steering, as well as the transmission mapping and the throttle mapping. There are no adjustable dampers here. So let's say if I put this into comfort mode, please don't try this at home, going downhill, change the plane of motion, and a C63S AMG, it ain't. But as we talked about in the tech review, there was some significant revisions to the rear suspension, specifically the control arms in the multi-link unit. They are thicker, and the bushings have changed. So now it is more composed going around turns than the previous model, but it's not orders of magnitude different, especially as I push it down here, because it's still the same design of rear suspension and effectively the same weight of vehicle. Okay, as we push this thing a lot harder going up this hill, 2 side notes. Number one, we talked about a new transmission in only the turbo models, which this is. It's an 8-speed. What I wanted to understand, does it hunt more now that it has more gears? And that is not the case at all. Hyundai has done a very nice job in designing and manufacturing this transmission. And the whole concept here was not so much to add the extra gear for improved fuel economy. It does improve fuel economy by 1, so it's not huge. The whole idea was to make the transmission more efficient. Then the other piece, the wheels have changed. So previously it was 16 to 17 inch wheels, whether it was a base car or turbo. But now in a turbo, they're all fitted with anything you want as long as it's 18 inch wheels. Now usually larger wheels will degrade the ride quality. In this case, it does make for a harsher ride. But keep in mind, I am a Lotus guy, I am broken, much like any other car guy or gal. I prefer a harsher ride going over the road. But it's not the type of ride that is particularly suited to taking the rugrats to the local charter school. So for the past 8 years that you and I have been doing this, the world has changed a lot, in some good ways, in some bad ways. But there's one way as it relates to cars that I'm very seriously kind of shocked about. You no longer look at a car just on what's the output, what's the fuel economy, can I put the rugrats in the back? Now it's a function of connectivity. And this is where we now grade car manufacturers based on how connected their vehicle is. Like, for example, we just talked about the Toyota Camry, how they're still kind of in the dark ages and that there's no Apple CarPlay. And then there's, well, the other side of things, and that's called Android Auto. Well, I got to take my hat off to Hyundai in this instance. That's because they've leapfrogged the competition in this connectivity area. Yeah, we've talked about driving dynamics and how like Mazda definitely outshines a Hyundai in that area. But here, not only did Hyundai adopt Apple CarPlay, like one of the first, and then Android Auto, also one of the first, but then they've kind of built on that. Like, for example, this has a charging system in the back seat, and then in the front, there's charging for not 1, but 2 phones on a wireless Qi plate. Then we talked about in, what was this? I want to say 2 years ago, when this system first came out with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, how you could go and retrofit a Hyundai that wasn't originally equipped with Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, you could update it via a USB drive. No one else I know is actually doing that. So let's slow down here, unpack a couple of notes. First, we're going to continue in this theme of the business case of the Sonata. Now, this may be a shock to you if you've been living under a rock for the past 10 years, but the vast majority of these things are manufactured in the US in Alabama. However, there are two models that are still imported from Korea, and that's the plug-in hybrid and the hybrid electric vehicle. And second, they've tried to go more uptown with this, not a totally new vehicle, more of a mid-cycle refresh. Like, for example, some of the trim here has changed. Like, they go out on a limb to tell you that blind spot is now standard. Some of the front and the rear has changed. They've hidden, like, where you open the trunk. It's actually pretty cool. It's within the Hyundai logo, and it looks like it's the metal, but it's not. I had a hard time figuring it out. But the thing that really stands out in terms of, like, uptown, they now have lights that are LED that turn with the wheels. I know this is passé for luxury cars, but a big deal for a Sonata. And last but certainly not least, and this is a bit of a nod to my old tech geek days, this thing has been updated. I don't necessarily mean just the Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. We discussed that in the tech review. No, what I mean is the computer that is behind it, the entire system. They call it the AVN 5.0, but let's put aside the marketing mumbo jumbo. It's a faster processor. And what that translates to is it switches between the apps faster, especially now that there are more apps in a Hyundai Sonata. Like here, I'm going to switch to the radio from CarPlay, and then say switch to the nav, and then switch to the map. If you look at how quick this is and go back to the media, there's like almost no, like, I don't want to have to clear that music, so as much as I'd love to listen to the Rolling Stones with you. Back to the radio, back to the menu here, back to the menu, thank you. Back to Apple CarPlay, and look at how quick that is. Huge difference from the previous model, but light years against some of its competition, because they're finally listening to when I complain in those Cadillac episodes about slow processors. And I'd also like to point out redundant controls with real knobs. People, real knobs. This is true excitement. So a funny thing about getting older, nothing really surprises you. And this is not just my New Yorker talking, this is just seeing the world. So when I stepped on the plane to come to San Diego to drive an updated Sonata, I did not expect a huge amount of change. Refinements, but not change. And I am somewhat shocked to notice the difference in the steering. It's like, do you remember when we drove the Hyundai Elantra Sport? It was a night and day difference the minute you got in that car, like, oh my God, something is different. And you're spending a little bit of time in it and you're like, wow, it's the rear suspension. This is the same sensation, but in this case, it's the steering. Is it an AMG or a Lotus? Absolutely not. It is still very much a mass market D segment car, just one that has more sharpened skills. So with that, we need to get back to this whole D segment thing. And I want to focus on a piece of information we have yet to cover, and I know we've covered a lot of bullets and numbers between now 2 episodes of this car. We have yet to cover the MPG. So in the best case scenario, putting aside the hybrids and the Eco, it is 25, 36, 29 combined. This one, the Turbo, is 23, 32, 26 combined. So pretty good when you consider this one being, what, 3,500 pound car. But my question is this: does MPG really matter in the D segment? Meaning, I get it, people buy C segment cars and they want 40 MPG or above. People buy a Prius, they want 50 MPG and above. But does like 2 MPG difference between this and the non-turbo make a difference? And not just does it make a difference, but why or why not? And most importantly, would you be willing to pay more for better MPG, and how much? Let me know in the comments below or via our social media, MotoManTV all in word, MotoManTV all in word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, I want to leave you with 2 things. Number 1, please unsubscribe and then resubscribe, click notifications. This is how much YouTube has screwed up the platform. And number two, a very interesting fun fact. So you guys met Chris Chapman, who runs design for the Americas for Hyundai. Great guy, came from BMW design. He's done some, like the X5 was his, the original one, and he's done a bunch of other stuff. Anyway, he's become a friend, so we geek out over different stuff and not just old cars. We geek out over like aerospace and like going to the moon, because as I told you guys in the past, my dad was an aerospace engineer. So he was telling me about this book he was reading that's all about the spacesuits on the Apollo missions, the very same Apollo missions that my dad designed the radar systems for. Well, those spacesuits were going to be like those old divers, like metal suits, and they couldn't move around because they couldn't figure out how to do the seams. So they went around to the entire aviation and aerospace industry to come up with a solution, and no one had a solution. So they ultimately had to go to Playtex, the bra company, to sew spacesuits. Until I see you next time, bis später.